Beyond the headlines. This is World Insight.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. China rolled out the red carpet for U.S. President Donald Trump when he arrived in the Chinese capital in Beijing on Wednesday evening. He's on a state visit to China until Friday. On Thursday, Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump exchanged in-depth views on relations between the two nations, also on world peace and development. During talks, Chinese President Xi Jinping said both sides have agreed to work toward building a constructive China-U.S. relationship of strategic stability. He also noted that China will not only open its doors further, and the U.S. businesses are deeply involved in China's reform and opening up. President Trump said he will work with President Xi to strengthen communication and cooperation, properly address differences, and improve bilateral relations. Chinese president also met in Beijing with U.S. entrepreneurs, accompanying President Donald Trump's visit to China. Later in the day, the Chinese and American leaders toured the iconic Temple of Heaven. It is a blue-tilted building known for its circular design and triple gabled roof. It is a place of harmony between heaven and the earth. In the evening, the two leaders attended a state banquet in Beijing. On Friday, the two leaders are to meet again for further discussion. How to understand the latest outcome of the meeting between the two leaders? I asked that question to Da Wei, an international relations professor who is also the director of Tsinghua University's Center for International Security and Strategy. Professor Da, what a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for joining us on this important day.
Thank you, Tian Wei, for having me. It's really my great honor and pleasure.
Professor Da, as the red carpet extended for the U.S. president, we understand many scholars like you are suggesting China-U.S. relations is graduating to a new stage. What kind of new stage would you like to describe to us?
China and the U.S. now in a time of, sometimes we say multipolar and also a nationalist world order. So if we look back to history, actually, China and the U.S. benefited a lot from the globalization, but that era of hyper-globalization, neoliberal international globalization has passed. So China and the U.S. cooperate a lot when we were in hyper-globalization time. But now we are in a more confronted or more, difficult time of this nationalist world order, and China and the U.S. need to learn how to coexist. So we are seeing that though in past few years, particularly last year, the China-U.S. relations has experienced many difficulties. But the two sides, each time when we have problems, no matter it's about export control or tariffs, the two sides return to the negotiation table. So we are getting to a situation that neither side are perfectly satisfied with, but also both sides feel, acceptable. I think this situation is something new. And if we can learn to live in such a condition, neither side satisfied, but both sides acceptable, I think that's the, a more matured bilateral relations between China and the United States.
So how would you describe the nature of trade in that framework?
Now, I think it is in the reality that the tariff will never return to the old level, but we still want the business relations to continue. The predictability, and the certainty of the level, I think that's important. So no matter it's 30% or 40%, so long as it's predictable, so long as it's certain, I think that will bring certainties for the two business communities. Then they can continue to do what they can do, and they will stop doing those things that they know that they cannot do.
What about export control?
The reality is, if you view the other side as a competitor, once you start that process, it's really hard to draw the line to say, where should I stop? We still remember during the Biden administration, there is a term on the U.S. side, small yard and high fence. President Trump does not use this term, but let's use that metaphor. Once you view the other side as a competitor, you will try to expand your yard. You will try to enlarge your yard. I think on export control measure, what I cares about is not about how big or how small the yard is, But I cares more about the position of the fence. We cannot move the fence every day. So long as you keep the fence there, and then business community know where is the area they can go, where is the area they cannot go, then I think that creates certainty.
We do notice that quite a number of business leaders coming from the United States are in the areas of chips, AI, and the list goes on. So how much do you think their presence here or support the conversation about export control between the two countries?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good news. We see, for instance, Jason Huang is here and also leaders from other AI or semiconductor related companies. I think the two countries are going to start a process of, AI governance dialogue. And also we may see some new measures on semiconductor export control from the US and from China. I think that's also good news. I don't think the big picture will change, but some technical changes could happen regarding certain, products, certain technology. I think that's possible.
We see over the past 2 years, many great people who are becoming bridge builders between the two sides. Now, latest Pew Research Center data shows 27% of Americans are having favorable views of China. That number is doubling the amount of 2023. Of course, one survey doesn't tell the whole story, yet it can be a great reference. So what do you think can be the potential of people-to-people relations between the two great peoples with this summit taking place between the two heads of states? How long can the impact last? How much of a pavilion, so to speak, can that create for this momentum?
Yeah, the people-to-people definitely is an important issue. And I think comparing with the security issue or like economic issue, I would say relatively it's a low-hanging fruit that the two sides can accelerate in the future. So far, unfortunately, people-to-people has not been on the agenda on the previous meeting. I mean, like in last October in Busan. I hope this time and in the following summits, the two leaders can do something to help the people from the two sides to travel with more respectful and a smooth way. China has already announced 50 to receive 50,000 American youth to China in 5 years. It's going really well, but we don't have enough American students here in China. So in my classroom, I have a few Americans, but we don't have enough. And we have. I also teach at the Schwarzman College at Tsinghua. We have several dozens of American students. They are great, but I really want to see thousands of more American students. No matter how you view China, no matter you view it as a partner, a rival, or anything else, you need to understand China. Without sending your young people to China to study in China, you cannot understand the country. And of course, that's also valid for China. Our students in the United States has also declined in recent years for about 50%. So yes, this is a difficult relationship, but the two leaders still meet, and the two teams are still talking, and the two business community are still working together. So for all this reason, I think these factors will further, build our people-to-people tie, which is, I think, solid foundation for the longer-term stability between China and the United States.
Right. How do you see the interests of both countries intertwined, especially now? And how do you see what some describe as G2? Do you think China really buys that idea?
Yeah, the relationship between China and the US, of course, have a lot of elements, competitive and also cooperative, sometimes more cooperation, sometimes more competition. But for me, the most important thing is not to say, we are competitor or we are partner, but in what context. It's not a, rosy relationship. We have a lot of problems, but that was a problem in globalization, in the time of globalization. Now it seems that we have more problems and we have some cooperations, but more important is we are now in a multipolar world. So China and the US strategically become more independent from each other. And we need to, then in this world, naturally we have more tensions, we have more disputes, but we still have some cooperations. The two sides still cannot, leave the other side, but I don't think that's a G2. I think as in this multipolar world, China and the US are the two most important poles or polars in the world. That's true. But G2, I think it's not a good idea, and nobody here in China really like or embrace that idea. But it is true that China and the U.S. share many responsibilities. Let's, take our own our responsibility separately and together, collectively. I think that will be good for China, U.S., and the world.
Hey there, global listeners. Get ready for the hottest discussions on the airwaves. Roundtable, your passport to the heart of China's buzzing society. Pressing issues, lifestyle trends, and impactful policies, we're tackling them head on with wit, wisdom, and a whole lot of fun. Discover the real China through the eyes and voices of its people. Gain a unique global perspective on topics that resonate universally. Tune in and turn up the excitement dial on Roundtable as we bridge gaps and break barriers one discussion at a time. Don't just listen, be transformed.
Beyond the headlines, this is World Insight.
Our topic on the state visit by the U.S. President Donald Trump to China. For a decade now, Schwarzman Scholars has been a banner for educational exchanges between China and the United States under the world-ranking Tsinghua University. And at the program, thousands of scholars from diverse backgrounds find fresh perspectives and common ground that have indelibly influenced their lives. So, what does the future hold for Schwarzman Scholars? Stephen A. Schwarzman himself has the answer. He is the founding trustee of the program. What are some of the challenges and solutions, Steve, you are thinking about these days about Schwarzman Scholars?
I don't think about legacy. I tend to do different types of new things, and I do them because they're great things to do without any reference to me. I just finished a meeting with all of our faculty, and they asked me the question, the world's changing geopolitically, it's changing technologically, it's changing economically. How should we be approaching this in terms of education for the students? And I said to them that the geopolitical changes and instability have happened in various times in history. I think we have to provide a framework for that so people, when they're younger, learn that this is the way the world's going to be. And there are going to be certain adjustments that you have to make when you're living in that world. And particularly in the technology area, where there'll be dramatic changes. And we should talk about the capability of technology and what it's going to evolve into, so that our students can understand a world that doesn't exist yet, but we know what it should be doing at that point in the future, and what are the options for changing the course of things. What issues, including AI safety, people have to be concerned about and engineer as a must do in the future, and it'll basically not be education about the past, which is what a lot of education is. It'll be education about the future.
Tell me more about what you have learned about China through this process.
When I came to China the first time with my children in 1990, but there were almost no cars in China, and they were all on bicycles. 10 years later, in 2000, the average income per person in China was only $300 for a whole year. So I've watched the absolute economic revolution that the government of China has helped create. for its people. It's astonishing. And now the average income, I think, is somewhere around $14,000. And you can turn it into RMB for me, but it's massive. And, I've watched this happen. And China's not meant to stop at that level. So it will continue to invest. It'll continue to grow. It'll continue to make the lives of its people better. And of course, then it has all its relationships around the world, some of which are easy, some of which more complicated.
So while China's wealth has been increasing, do you see trying to search for its own identity, so to speak? What does that mean to you during your process of discovering China?
Well, China's place in the world historically has always been pretty clear. This is a 5,000-year-old country, and they've always been the dominant economic power in Asia. They're busy reclaiming that, and I think that will continue.
Beyond the headlines, this is World Insight.
Our topic today, China-U.S. relations. Over the nearly 9 years since U.S. President Donald Trump last visited, China has become far more tech-capable in areas such as electronic vehicles, robots, and open-source AI. So what does this mean for ties between the two largest economies and two largest tech-driven economies? To answer about that, I catch up with Scott Kennedy about why China's becoming more confident when dealing with the United States. Scott is a senior advisor and trustee chair in Chinese business and economics with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Now, you mentioned your recent article you wrote upon U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to China, suggesting that he is going to see a more confident China. What do you mean?
In the 8.5 years since President Trump was last in Beijing, so that'd be November of 2017, Beijing and China have changed quite a bit. Technologically speaking, China is a lot more capable than it was 8.5 years ago. EVs, solar, high-speed rail, a whole variety of different technologies that the Chinese are working on, which gives them more weight in the global economy.
Right, of course, we've been hearing since Busan about the Board of Trade and the Board of Investment. Now, there have been mixed media reports about the possibilities of these two and what eventually it might become.
So I think the U.S.'s view in proposing these ideas is that since we are not really engaging in trade based on commitments to the WTO or even previous bilateral commitments, we need to build new structures to manage this, that everything can't be arbitrary. Because of the Supreme Court ruling in February regarding the reciprocal tariffs that the U.S. had imposed, that has put the U.S. In a bit of a quandary. And we have a publicly visible debate in the U.S. through the Congress and the executive on policy. The U.S. also has launched new 301 investigations against China and others, which could result in decisions to potentially raise tariffs more. This Board of Trade might be a mechanism to tackle some of those questions and potentially preempt some of the decisions, at least that would be made on the executive side, because we have separation of powers. The executive branch and the president can't entirely control Congress, because Congress has an independent authority to have some say on this. But nevertheless, this Board of Trade might be a mechanism to discuss those issues. The Board of Investment, the other issue, might deal with sort of, again, specific kinds of investment issues related to questions of fairness and market access. It might also deal with some of those national security issues regarding screening of investments. There's also issues of M&A deals that both sides have said that they have the right to weigh in on. But it may also look at broader questions of investment, future investment. A lot of people have talked about potentially having Chinese investment in manufacturing in the United States, in electric vehicles, batteries, and maybe other sectors. And so I think the Board of Investment is probably more of a conceptual framework at this point than a detailed plan that they'll roll out. And really, we don't know exactly what will emerge from this meeting. And we do know that it's possible that the two leaders will have several more interactions this year. So I think we ought to look at the meetings this week as the first section of a multi-stage process where if everything isn't complete and announced this week, there's still opportunities to clarify and finish the discussions by the end of this year.
Scott, there has been increasing concern about the weaponization and also the securitization of economic and trade issues. How much are they likely to hinder the economic development of both economies?
Sure. Well, I would say over the past few years, both sides have armed themselves with these tools. Starting in the first Trump administration, putting ZTE and Huawei on the entity list. We now have probably 1,500 Chinese companies on the entity list. The U.S. has also created a mechanism for restricting exports of advanced semiconductors and semiconductor equipment, but China has done so as well. 2020 export control law, putting a whole variety of minerals on their export control list. So right now it looks like an export controls arms race. I think we need to take a breather, and I think there are some kinds of export controls and restrictions that are reasonable, where both sides have some concerns that are reasonable, that they need to restrict some of those technology flows because they have potential national security implications, dual use capabilities.
You have noticed that China has become, as your article wrote, over the past 7 to 8 years, stronger economically, overall speaking, and also more confident in both technological development as well as in becoming a stakeholder, an ever more important stakeholder in the world.
China's overall economic structure has changed significantly in a way that makes it much more competitive against the most advanced economies. And so the question is, how is the world going to deal with that and manage that? Because China's scale is so massive. It accounts for such a large percentage of global trade and economic flows. So the question is, can we come up with a set of rules and principles to manage this huge shift in the global economy? I think beyond those issues of how we manage each other bilaterally or on the global stage, one of the things that we've been talking about for a long time is China being a responsible stakeholder internationally.
You noticed that there is a big delegation of business leaders coming from the United States. At the same time, the U.S. President Donald Trump is traveling in China and having meeting with his Chinese counterpart. So what do you make of the impact of the business community on the overall economic and trade policies in the U.S. this time?
The U.S. and China have a very large commercial relationship that goes without saying across the board in many different industries, right? And I think the presence of this delegation reinforces that significance. It doesn't mean that they are happy and approve of everything that both sides are doing, but it suggests how critical this bilateral relationship is, as well as for these companies' global businesses. And I think it also is an encouragement of both sides that where there are significant disagreements around issues of fairness and economic security, I think these companies want solutions. They want more than fragile stability. They want predictability of their businesses in China and their businesses globally. And so, and they might have some suggestions about how to achieve greater fairness and greater security while continuing to have a commercial relationship. And so I think that is a constructive sign and I think it's important for the leaders of both countries to listen to business leaders from the United States as well as from China, having met with a variety of Chinese company executives.
China has stated very clearly the Taiwan question is the core of the core interest of China. How do you think the conversations will likely to evolve between the two leaders regarding China's core interest, like the question of Taiwan?
When I was in China recently and on previous trips, and when Chinese officials come to the United States, the question of Taiwan comes up quite frequently. And I think Americans recognize how significant this is from Beijing's perspective. I think the U.S. official policy and in talking to American officials, the number one goal is to maintain peace, avoid open conflict because of the destruction that it would cause in the region and globally. And so at least the conversation might give President Trump an opportunity to further explain what American policy is. And at least that level of transparency and conversation will provide greater clarity on both sides, because I think we also need to avoid miscalculation and some kind of accident, which would be devastating for everybody.
That is all the time we have for today. A whole episode about U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to China and the relations between China and the United States. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you tomorrow.